This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. This week, Koom talks to Bryan Talbot, creator of such graphic novels as The Adventures of Luther Arkwright, Heart of Empire, and the Grandville series. He's also co-founder of the Lakes International Comic Art Festival, which this year was held October 13th to 15th in the town of Kendal in the Lakes District of the UK. They'll talk about that, a fantasy book Bryan is considering making that would be based on real-life political developments, Bryan's encounters with Alan Moore, and more. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support.
This is Koom for Deconstructing Comics, talking to Bryan Talbot at his home in Sunderland in the UK. Bryan, how are you doing?
Yes, okay.
What's the weather like in Sunderland?
It's been nice today. I've just spent most of the hours getting ready for preparing to do this window display. I'm going to Kendal tomorrow morning, where the Lakes International Comics Art Festival is held in a couple of weeks, and as part of the festival, they have a sort of window trail, just like in Angoulême. We're participating stores in High Street put on comic displays for a month. And this year I'm doing one. I'm doing a Grandville display in one of the shop windows, so I've just been preparing for that.
That's perfect. Is Kendal in the Lake District?
Yes, it's at the tip of the Southern Lakes, but it's a beautiful little town, and that's the great thing about it for the festival is it's small enough to take over. We can actually take over the entire town.
Yeah, that's great.
A bit like Angoulême or Lucca, and so we have events going on in the arts centre, the library, the town hall, various bars, and various other buildings around the centre, and they're all about 5 minutes walk from each other. So it's there's banners in the streets advertising the festival, and it is really like a town on set, and quite a few of the events are free entry. So we get a lot of the townspeople coming, which is great. So you don't just get comic fans, and you get a lot of ordinary people we're introducing to comics.
Well, it seems to be a good time. I was at the London Festival. Well, it wasn't a festival. It was a con, but it was quite nice. And then they just wrapped up Thought Bubble, I think. And then now you've got your Lakes Festival. So it just seems to be a nice kind of, you could just keep on going north, I guess. Yeah. And then just festival after festival.
I remember 12 or 15 years ago, there were only one or two every year,
Yeah.
It seems to be one every weekend.
How long have you been doing the Lakes Festival? And you're sort of the main force behind it, right?
No, I was one of the founders of it. But I don't do the real work. I leave it to the organisers. But this is its fifth year.
Oh, okay. So it's still pretty young.
The first year we got about 4,000 people. I think we're up to about 15,000 people now. So it's getting better every year, bigger every year.
And it's over a weekend?
Yes, it's over the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
And is there any particular focus this year? Anything that you want to announce about it?
There's a few things. For me especially, it's we're actually launching the fifth Grandville book, which is an entire month ahead of the official publication date. And we're having a Grandville event as one of the things, and it's great to be launching. But the two of the themes this year are, one's Finnish comics. So we've got quite a lot of Finnish comic creators coming over. We get a lot of, European people come from European countries. So we're having sort of Finnish village, one part of the town, which the Finns are taking over. And we're also having a sort of Tove Jansson Moomins thing.
Are you having one of his relatives come over and speak about him? I believe he's got a grandson or something that... Tove Jansson was actually a woman. Sorry, I was about to correct myself. Go on.
I'm not sure because I'm not one of the organisers, but I do think there's somebody coming over to represent her. Off the top of my head, I think there's, yeah.
So I know that you love the lakes because of The Tale of One Bad Rat. How did you end up forming such a strong connection to the point where you decided to found a festival there with your friends?
Well, that was a total coincidence. The reason it ended up in the lakes. My link with the lakes was that when I was about 14, my parents bought a caravan, what you call a trailer, in the Lake District, and we lived about an hour's drive away. So any time we had any spare time, and Dad had time off, holidays, vacations, whatever, we'd be up there in the Lake District. And the caravan was in the middle of a sort of forest, so that was great for me as a kid. I just sort of went off all day and explored. I used to draw maps of the forest and things like that. And I walked all around the valley it was in. I know that valley about the back of my hand. I followed all the footpaths all the way around it many times. So I sort of half grew up there in the lake. And when I was doing comics, that seemed to be a great setting for a book and a great backdrop. So that's how, the Tale of One Bad Rat came about. But the fact there's a festival there, it's complete coincidence. I, just over 5 years ago, had an email from the organiser, Julie Tate, that's what she does. She's a professional festival organiser. That's her job. And she'd had an idea for a comic festival, to have a comic festival somewhere in the lakes. And she'd mentioned this to Sean Phillips, the artist who lives nearby. He actually lives up there. And apparently Sean said to him, speak to Bryan Talbot about it. And so I got this email from her saying, do you think it's a good idea to have a comics festival in Britain, it's something I've dreamt of for years. It was about 30 years ago, I went to my first European convention. I was just blown away by it, it's like this entire town celebrating comics.
Yeah.
And I even tried to start one, myself in the past, including here in Sunderland. But, there's been comic marts and conventions in Britain since the 60s.
Sure.
But we've never had one of these things where, you take over the entire town and the council is one of the people who fund it. And, we get funding from business and everything. It's a non-profit making enterprise. And so it was just a coincidence that, Julie happened to live in the lakes and thought that'd be a good venue.
Yeah, well, the time's really right for it, and people have often said that you've been very much a part of the history of the growth of the art in the UK, so we can get to that later. Just out of curiosity, how far is Sunderland from the lakes?
Sunderland, it's about 2 hours drive.
Okay, so you're on sort of like towards the east coast then, of the north, right then?
Yeah, I'm on the opposite coast of the Lake District.
Yeah, so we should definitely make sure we talk about Grandville Force Majeure, because that's your upcoming book before we kind of trail off into other things. So from what I read, and I did honestly tell you that I read the first Grandville around the time it came out, and I actually met you. I don't know if you'll remember this, but I was in the UK 3 years ago and you were at one of those bigger cons, which you say you kind of detest now, but you were at the London Film and Comicon, and I talked to you a little bit then, and I think you had some Grandville art with you. Does this ring a bell?
Yes, I would have done. Yeah, I think that's the last sort of media con I went to.
Yeah. And then are you friends with David Roach? He was kind of complaining about how they treated the comic book artists, especially that year where they shunted you all off away from the main space.
That's right. That's one of the reasons I don't like them, these media conventions.
Yeah.
Even San Diego, I've stopped going there because it's just become a sort of circus. It's
sure.
Comics are a very tiny part of it now. I can remember when it was all about comics, San Diego.
Well, yeah. I mean, as a fan too. I mean, you just walk around and there are just people there who don't give a rat's about comics. They're just there to take selfies and that kind of thing. And it's, but
what was nice is last year we went to, as guests, the San Diego Comic Festival, which was in February, and it was organized by the original organizers of the San Diego Comic-Con, and they were trying to get back to what it used to be like. And it was very small and very cozy, but it was they only had a couple of thousand people there, but it was great.
Well, you used the term festival too, as opposed to con. So I'm just realizing that's a way of linguistically separating yourself or stating your purpose as not doing what the cons are doing now.
That's right.
Yeah. To me, the word con still has a nice feeling because the cons I remember when I was younger were very small. You paid like $5. They'd have a couple of guests, and it would be neat to get stuff signed by them. But mostly you were filling in on, comics that you couldn't find normally at your local comic shop, and it was just a nice thing. But anyway, we should go back to Grandville. So, like I told you, I read the first one. Haven't read any of the subsequent ones, but did read up a little on them online. And so from what I gather, the new one, Force Majeure, maybe has kind of a bit of a Tarantino-esque effect or influence on it because you've got gangsters.
Yeah, there's gangsters in it. I mean, the first one had a bit of Tarantino influence. The first one was a bit like, Sherlock Holmes, directed by Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, which is an odd kind of thing. I got to say. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so the second one's more like Sherlock Holmes, directed by Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
So it's each one's had its own different atmosphere.
Yeah. So why the conjunction of Sherlock Holmes, which is a fairly civilized and genteel world, with that of Tarantino? I mean, sure, there's murder and crime, but the approaches are very different, no?
It's I couldn't begin to listen. There's a whole set of influences on Grandville and Holmes and Tarantino too. But in this one, there is quite a big homage to Sherlock Holmes, because in this story we finally see Detective Inspector LeBrock, who's the protagonist of the series. We eventually see his sort of untold backstory, and we discover how he was, trained up by this mentor, who was really just like a Sherlock Holmes type figure, and who's an evil, of course, anthropomorphic series. And Holmes was very often described as having an aquiline profile, so I think the evil was quite suitable.
Oh, okay, interesting. You've done Grandville, I don't know if the pages will outnumber Luther Arkwright, but you certainly, stuck with it. You're saying that this one is perhaps the last and final chapter, but why has this world, the steampunk world, where the French Empire has kind of taken over England, and then England has sort of resisted and gotten its independence, and then you've got these anthropomorphic creatures. Why this world? Why is this kind of, stuck with you more than anything else over the last almost 10 years now?
Yeah, I have done about 4 books in between, 4 other graphic novels.
That's true, yeah.
But I just have a lot of fun writing these stories. They're great fun to write, which is usually a good sign if I'm enjoying them.
But yet they're not light affair, right? I mean, they're not something that you do for fun, just in between, like, Daughter of My Father's Eyes or...
No, I mean, they actually take a lot more work than the books that they would now, because, the books they would now see scripts, and I use a lot more sort of relaxed style for those books, so they're actually a lot quicker to do. It's a style that's more suitable for the sort of story Mary's telling. I mean, Mary's stories wouldn't suit this sort of highly polished, finished Grandville style. Right. Which takes,
You said about 4 days for one page, right?
4 days a page. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm stopping, is that they take too long. It takes far too long to do. It's taken nearly 2 years to do this 164-page story, which is the last Grandville, which is by far the longest one. And another reason it's ending now is because although each book is a standalone story, like a Tantan album, for example, you can read them out of order if you like. But reading them in order, there is a sort of slow story arc that's been building in the background, and it all sort of comes to fruition in the fifth one, which is another reason it's going to be the final one. Because I honestly, and I'm very proud of the story, and I'm pleased with the story, and I don't think you have to better it as a Grandville story, so it's good to go out, while you're winning. It's good to go out with a bang.
Right. Do you feel like the audience appreciation or reaction has increased as you produce more Grandville, or has it sort of peaked and is that why you're saying you want to go out before it peters out?
No, I honestly think each Grandville book is actually better than the one before, and it's something I've tried to push, push myself to do a better story than the one before, and I think as a Grandville story, this one it has it all, and it's like a roller coaster ride. There's a lot of deduction in there, a lot of humour in there. It's quite a dark book in a lot of ways. The villain is definitely one of the sort of vilest villains I've ever written. He's a completely nasty piece of work.
And it also just seems like wonderfully British, both in terms of the Victorian, darkness, but also in terms of the anthropomorphic animals, which, you've acknowledged many times, comes from Rupert Bear and maybe to some degree Beatrix Potter. I would also think of Wind of the Willows. It's very attractive. So I know you talked about
to answer your earlier question, why where did it come from? All this sort of Napoleonic stuff, and that is because the original concept was. I was looking at a book I've had for decades on the artwork of Jean-Ignace Isidore-Gérard, who was a French illustrator in the early 19th century. And he did a lot of these anthropomorphic cartoons, with sort of social satires. And he did them under the name of J.J. Grandville. And I just suddenly thought, well, Grandville, it could be the nickname of a Paris in an alternative reality, in a world where it's the biggest city in the world. And I thought, well, how would it become the biggest city in the world? And Napoleon won. Right. And he has a huge French empire. So that was the sort of basic idea.
Well, it's a great premise, and it's sort of got a sci-fi aspect to it, and I guess that's got a commonality with Luther Arkwright, because in the first Luther Arkwright series, the English Empire just kept on rolling along and didn't end in the mid-20th century when...
Well, that's just in the first chapter of Luther Arkwright. Most of Luther Arkwright is set on a parallel world where England's sort of backwater, where the Civil War's still going on. And the royalists are actually the terrorists, and Britain is still ruled by a descendant of Oliver Cromwell, and it's turned into this horrible sort of Puritan fascist dictatorship.
Under Cromwell?
Over the years, yeah.
You said before that you're a socialist. Do you still identify that way? And I think you said that you're a big supporter of your local Labour candidate who's really good friends with Tony Benn. Is that all still true, or given Brexit in the last year, have you changed any of your feelings or your...
No, not at all. The thing that has changed is Chris Mullen, who's the MP, who lived 7 doors away from here, the Labour MP, who was a friend of Tony Benn. He retired at the last election but won. And he's retired and lives in the country now.
So are you still supporting Labour then? Are you happy?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I'm support Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's a great breath of fresh air.
So, in terms of going back to some of those countercultural times that I really wanted to talk to you about, and really any wonderful stories you have to impart or anything of interest would be great, but we're going back to about the mid-'70s for the beginning, or late 70s for the beginnings of your career, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I read that you were just drawing in a lot of influences that weren't really used in comics at the time, from the films of Nicholas Roeg to, topics like history, counterculture, sex, just bodily functions and all of that.
William Hogarth.
Yes.
Illustrators like that, yes.
Yes, and somewhat of a satirical tradition, I guess, as well, in there. So I was just trying to get a sense of where you'd kind of arrived, that was about almost 40 years ago. Where have you arrived kind of over the time? Are you still motivated by those things? I mean, a lot of those things have filtered down into comics or become more mainstream. Certainly the violence is still part of your work, even though the art style has changed, quite a bit. Or are you looking to do other things? What keeps you going now?
I always try and do something new, I mean, that's another reason this last Grandville, because I've done 5 books now, and it's about nearly 550 pages worth of story. So, I want to do something fresh. But, yes, I mean, I think it's probably the same for anybody who writes comics, who draws comics. They're always everything you see, every movie, every book you read, whatever. It's all just vanilla. It's all, is that a good idea? Can I adapt that? Can I, does that inspire me to do something similar? I think that's the same with everybody, I think.
I guess it's true. I was just wondering if you were still feeling like, I don't know if you'd call it a punk kind of sensibility, but that same kind of, injection of vital counterculture juices, or is it something else? Have you kind of slowed down in middle age, and are you looking to do something a bit more mainstream or established?
Do you mean mainstream superheroes?
No, definitely not, because I know you're not a fan of those. But I mean, just something... I mean,
I enjoy a good superhero story like anybody else, but I'm not really a superhero artist. I'm not into...
No.
Balletics, acrobatics and stuff like that.
No, but I mean, when you were doing your original stuff, whether it was Luther Arkwright or Chester P. Hackenbush, that was really, on the outskirts. Whereas I think Grandville, One Bad Rat are more mainstream because they've been brought into schools. I don't know about Grandville really because it's got the violence, but I could certainly see a teacher doing that with her high school students and saying, "Hey, let's look at the history. Let's look at the satire."
This week I had an email from a teacher who said that the Grandville books are one of the most popular items in the school library, and she just bought a new set because they were also so warm with being read and reread.
And I think partly that's the attractiveness of the art. I wouldn't say it's Disney, but there is something, like we said, that's Wind in the Willows, or that's Rupert-esque just about the look, right? Whereas the 70s stuff, the late 70s stuff that you did wasn't like that at all.
No, it's part of the drawing style, because I used to use a lot of black and white, the cross-hatching and everything that has a quite different feel to it. And I don't know, if I ever go back to Luther, I may sort of go back to the experimental style, and which is something I've thought about. I think about it now and again. In fact, I have a folder full of notes for a third Luther book. I don't know if I'll eventually get round to doing it. It's something I may do in the future.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out whether maybe kind of the ethos or your mindset had kind of changed over the last 35 years or something, but I don't know, the sense I'm getting is more like you go from project to project, try to find something that's interesting, and you don't think too much about the overall trajectory of your career. It's more like whatever is kind of new at the time.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. I mean, a lot of it is reaction against what's going on at any one time. You have to remember the Luther story
was against Thatcher.
Yeah. It went on against his background within Britain in the late 70s, the rise of the far right. There was Thatcher in power, and parties like the National Front. He was out in fascists, marching on the streets of Britain. It was quite frightening. And it's the same thing, which is a year or two later drove, Alan Moore to do V for Vendetta. We were both reacting to the same background. And if I do another Luther Arkwright, it's probably reacting against this horrible swing to the right we're getting now, with Brexit and with Donald Trump in the White House. Probably reacting against that.
Coming up, a fantasy book based on real-life politics, working with Alan Moore on the story Nightjar, and more. Thanks to our patrons, this past week I released the vintage episode number 116 from February 25th, 2008, Kumar's very first appearance on Deconstructing Comics, in which we review David Yurkovich's Death by Chocolate Redux and discuss manga translation. This week I'll be releasing number 115, an interview with Chris Staros from Top Shelf Productions. Watch for it at the end of your podcast feed, on our Facebook page, or at patreon.com/deconcomics, where you can pledge a monthly amount to keep the show going and unlock more vintage episodes. We appreciate your support. When you watched Batman as a kid, you enjoyed the colorful heroes and villains, the text sound effects on the screen, the thrill of watching a heroic crime fighter escaping from death traps and taking down bad guys. But the show was devised to interest adults, too. What did you miss as a kid? Sexual innuendo.
The penguin's too small for me.
Closeted gay characters.
I like that cape, Batman.
Freudian death traps.
Has the giant clam really swallowed Robin?
Police incompetence.
Bruce Wayne is a millionaire playboy. Hardly a secret identity for Batman.
Whether you're a kid or an adult, there's something to like about our favorite Caped Crusader. Tim and Paul dig for the deeper meanings under the Batmania every first, third, and fifth Thursday of the month. What's the podcast's name?
To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles.
Yeah, so you were talking about a classical fantasy story?
Yeah, which I've been thinking about. It's been in the back of my mind for, must be about 15 years now. And I've got a folder full of notes on it. In fact, I've got the whole book structured out, and I've actually even read the first chapter. I may well do that.
Do you mind talking about what that's about, or is that just something you'd rather leave in your subconscious?
It's just a classic sort of fantasy story, sort of social story. In a way, which I've never done. So,
is it a throwback fantasy story to the kinds of things that were popular in the 70s, or is it? Yeah,
probably. It's probably, I don't know. It's probably a mixture of Tolkien and Bourne. I don't know. It's it's like most things I do. It's a melange of different sort of genres.
Right. But anyway, just to go back to Brexit and Trump, would you feel that an Arkwright story is the best way to handle that? Or do you feel that you could just be open to kind of a variety of things and just channel your feelings into whatever the thing is next?
I do. It may well be the Arkwright story I use for that, because I've made, as I say, quite a few notes, and some of them related to Brexit and Trump, which won't be mentioned in the story, but it'll be, I don't know, sort of referred to obliquely in the story about things that it'll be sort of anti-nationalistic, probably.
Right. So you were talking about Alan Moore a second ago. I did want to ask you about the time that you worked on Nightjar. I know that probably for you it was just something that didn't peter out, but do you have any interesting stories about that time at Warrior, or?
I actually did several things with Alan. I worked on upward. I probably about 4 strips with him altogether.
Sure. Well, I do remember the
underground magazines. I did Slow Death in America.
Sorry, did you say you worked on something called Slow Death in America?
No, I don't know if it's still going. I doubt it. But there's an American underground comic called Slow Death, which started in the '60s, and I did draw a strip that Alan wrote for that. But we did a couple of more strips that were reprinted in alternative British magazines.
So you did the Slow Death. The 2000 AD one I remember is the one where it's sort of like an infomercial almost for people who want to become intergalactic villains. You did that one, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah. I also did an ABC Warriors one with him.
Okay. How did you end up meeting? Just through circles at the comic marts and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I actually met him for the first time at the Society of Strip Illustration, which was strip creators, and this was before. And I met him at one of the. And one of the first things he said to me was, I'm really a big fan of Luther Arkwright. And I'm working on a story myself with David Lloyd that's, on similar lines.
Right, so he was already a Warrior by the time you met him?
No, it was about a year or two before Warrior was launched.
Oh, really? He was already working on that with David?
Yeah, he was already talking about it, thinking about it. What you got to remember was that Des Skin was planning Warrior and started doing it about a year or two before it came out.
Right.
It took it seemed to take forever for it to appear. He was talking about it for years. But yeah, at the time, Alan was, I think he was doing Stars My Degradation.
Right.
For
Sounds.
For Sounds.
Yeah.
In fact, when he actually left, when he started doing a lot of work for, DC and stuff, and he left Sounds, I took over from him on Sounds, doing a strip which I wrote and drew called Scumworld. Because they said, can you recommend anybody if you're leaving? And he recommended me, and so I worked for Sounds for about a year after that. And then after me, it was Eddie Campbell.
Just to go back to Nightjar, though, which you were proposing to Warrior, did you end up going into the offices? Did you talk with Skin, or were you just completely working through the mail?
No. I mean, I actually knew Des Skin a lot longer than I knew Alan. I first met Des Skin at a comic mart in about 1971, where he was a comic dealer. And he published a magazine called Fantasy Advertiser, which I, around 72 or 73, actually did a cover for when I was doing fan art. Alan, we were supposed to be doing this strip for Warrior, and it would have been Alan's first supernatural strip. And his big idea was that we'd get away from comic magicians like Doctor Strange and Satana and stuff, and they ground something in reality. And what he was basing it on was like the horror fiction of the time, like by Clive Barker and Stephen King and Ramsey Campbell, with this like urban horror.
Which ended up finding its way into Swamp Thing later, I think.
Well, yes, he later, because the strip fell through, because Alan fell out with Des and he wouldn't speak to Des, and he said he'd finished his commitment on V Vendetta and Nobleman, but he wouldn't do anything new for them. So, that's it. Nightjar stalled. I'd only drawn about the first 4 pages, I think, by that point. And yes, he later recycled all these ideas into Swamp Thing. He came up to our house once or twice, and we actually went scouting for locations because it was all going to be set in Lancashire, where I lived, in around Pendle Hill, which was where they lived in the 70s. And we drove all, I got a friend of mine, I didn't drive at the time, so he drove us all the way around. We took lots of pictures and, found the house where she'd live and things like that. So we had beforehand, and talked about it quite a lot. But yes, it never actually happened.
Well, it could have been one of those really interesting projects like Miracle Man, which also suffered quite a bit, but Marvel Man, but did you have any of the kind of the friction with Skin, or did you find it difficult to, interact or stomach some of your dealings with him?
No, I always got on. I mean, he was never a really close friend, but I always seemed to get on with Des. He's quite an affable guy, He's always joking about something or other. But
do you think it's because you're both Northerners, or?
I don't know, because I come from Lancashire and he comes from Yorkshire, and there's a big rivalry.
There's a rivalry, yeah.
Yeah.
In cricket, for sure.
In Lancashire, we have a saying, which is Yorkshire born, Yorkshire bred, strong in the arm, thick in the head.
I grew up in Leeds, so I take offense to that. Go on.
But I always got on with Des, really. But yeah, Alan had a lot of friction with him. I don't know. I reckon Des was ripping him off. I don't know if he was or not.
Well, yeah, there were, I think, stories from other people too about very late payments, and I mean, it's hard to be objective because you're always just hearing people's opinions, but
I heard both sides. I heard Des's side, I heard Alan's side, and I don't know which is true.
Yeah. Anyway, so
because as you know, I mean, Alan has a habit of falling out with people and falling out with publishers. Throughout his career, he's got very for a bit and then stops.
He's got very strong principles, and it's hard not to admire that at the same time because he takes stands on things. But at the same time, his reactions are very severe, and I don't know. I mean, I can't be objective about that either because I admire him so much, as you know.
But there's very few artists who actually speak to now. He won't speak to Dave Gibbons. He won't speak to Dave Lloyd. He won't. He won't.
And
he's cut off.
Are you feeling the same? Like, do you feel like you've also been blocked out?
No. I've never fallen out with him with anything. The thing is, I don't see much of him these days. I don't see any of him, and very seldom do I speak to him. In recent years, the only time I've actually spoken to him is where, on occasions where people have got in touch with me to say, "Oh, I'd like to interview Alan," and put us in touch, and I would never give out his phone number. So I'd give him a ring first to say, "Is it okay if I pass your phone number on?" But that's the only time I've spoken to him in the last. I don't think I've spoken to him at all for the last couple of years.
And when you do that, has there been any sense of connection from the old days, or is it just a more business kind of thing?
Well, we used to be quite good friends at one time, but we just, didn't live in different towns, I suppose. And then Alan stopped going to comic conventions, so we just didn't see each other.
And to go back to Nightjar, was that something that you both sort of hashed out? Like, I mean, you talked about David Lloyd and David Gibbons. I mean, both those projects, at least V for Vendetta when it started, and definitely Watchmen, were kind of, that really came out of the collaboration Was Nightjar to be like that too?
Yeah, it was quite close. I mean, Alan was coming up with a story, and he suggested this idea of the magicians in the story being referred to by the names of birds, and it was called the Empire of the Birds.
Yeah.
And I remember that I suggested the name Nightjar because I'd actually recently seen a couple in the Lake District, actually, and they had a really strange cry. And there was really sort of turtles in the sky at dusk. It was really strange. It was actually a title that their skin didn't like. He said it made him think of a pint of beer in the evening. Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was a good name. And as I said, I suggested Pendle Hill as a location in Lancashire, which Alan quite liked the idea.
And in a way, it kind of connects to your animals in The Tale of One Bad Rat, and even the anthropomorphic animals in Grandville. So there is kind of a connection there, I guess, even though it wasn't really given a chance to flourish.
I don't know. I don't think there's any anthropomorphism in Nightjar, as far as I remember.
There's no what in Nightjar, sorry?
No anthropomorphic characters.
No, but just, the animal connection and the nature connection, which I think is sort of one half of your work, or like your oeuvre, and then the other half, I think, is a very kind of political, satirical, historical side to your work. So those are the sides that I kind of see.
Yeah.
Let me ask you in the last bit of the interview about working with Mary. Do you have anything in the works right now?
Yes, I'm currently drawing her a new book, the next book, which is it's about environmental issues, and it's not. It's the first book, graphic novel she's done that isn't to do with biography or autobiography or historical characters. It's set in present day, and it uses real events, things that have actually happened, though the characters involved in these events are fictitious.
Is it completely fictitious, or are you using any current political events or corporation?
Yeah, well, not political events, but sort of. It's set around real events. It's set 2 years ago around very real events that happened here. I don't want to give too much away, but it's about climate change, a lot of it.
Right. And is that still kind of in the planning processes at this point?
No, it's all scripted. We have a publisher, Jonathan Cape. We've just received an Arts Council grant to do it as well, and I'm currently drawing it. I'm about 10 or 12 pages in.
Oh, okay, very good. So, given your kind of rate of production, it's probably maybe a year and a half away then?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other projects you want to talk about, or anything else that we should cover?
Probably not, because apart from the fantasy one I mentioned and the Arkwright one I may do, they're the only ones I can see myself doing in the foreseeable future. Yeah,
and you don't want to talk too much about any of the nitty-gritty in terms of the content of those?
Not really, because they're too far away, they're years away.
You don't want to be pinned down to something by...
No, yeah, because I may change them, I may change the ideas. I think the Arkwright one especially is still in a bit of flux, which is the bit I like in the story, when it could go any way, any direction.
Sure. And just if I can ask, I usually ask artists what kind of materials do they like to use, and are they feeling any certain challenges or difficulties in terms of drawing, inking, painting, etc. In terms of
not having any difficulties. I'm, as you know, I colour the Grandville ones on computer. This story, it's going to be sort of full watercolour.
Are you using a tablet then? You're not even using a brush anymore?
Yeah, I am for Mary's books. Yeah, the watercolor, the watercolor washes over an ink line. But yeah, the colours in Grandville are all done on a tablet.
Okay, I didn't realize that. I thought you were still using a brush for the Grandville stuff.
No. It's, I mean, one of the reasons it take a long time was that the computer stuff, you can go on forever, changing things.
And you're doing all of the color yourself as well, right?
Yes. I've paid 3 people to do, start colouring pages for me because it was so long. It's 165 pages. Anything that saves time is great. But what I've found is that after they've coloured the page, I have to spend most of the day going over it to change it to make it look more like my colouring, because it has to be consistent.
Right.
And they obviously not colouring in my style, so sometimes it actually takes longer.
Well, we can wrap up there. I'll wish you great luck with the Lakes Festival and the window display and launching Force Majeure. I hope it's as successful or more successful than all of the other books. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Bryan Talbot is at bryan-talbot.com. That's bryan-talbot.com. After this interview was recorded, the news broke that Grandville has been optioned as a TV series. Reading from Bryan's site, quote, "The series would be a mixture of live action with CGI for animal and other effects. They say writer Julian Simpson is working on the development of a TV adaptation of Bryan Talbot's groundbreaking series of graphic novels with Euston Films, part of Fremantle Media UK, under the collective title Grandville. They are currently in the process of attaching a director," unquote. So if you're a Grandville fan, be on the lookout for that. Tell us what you think. Write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com, Twitter at deconcomics, like our Facebook page or join our Facebook discussion group. Find all the links on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. We're also on YouTube, on the Comics Podcast Network at comicspodcasts.com, and on comicon.com, where our new episodes appear a few days before they show up anywhere else. Also, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or iHeartRadio. We really need more listeners to give us reviews and help us stand out from the many comics podcasts that are out there. Our theme is from bensound.com. Last Thursday on To the Batpoles, we discussed Frank Gorshin's final Batman appearance, the 3rd season episode Ring Around the Riddler, and also a 1977 write-up of Batman 66 in Gary Guarani's book Fantastic Television. What did Guarani write about Adam West that someone who grew up with the show would never say? Look up To the Batpoles wherever you find your podcasts or at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Normally, Critiquing Comics comes out on the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of the month, but instead, this coming Thursday, we have a special edition of Deconstructing Comics, in which we hear from 2 old friends. Irene Strakalski, a penciler on Marvel's Gwenpool, gives us her 10 guidelines for making thumbnails of your comics pages. This is the part of comics art that's mainly about storytelling, and you've got to get it right so you don't confuse your readers. Also, Jason McNamara, writer of such graphic novels as The Martian Confederacy and The Rattler, talks about his new job as creative consultant for the NBA's Golden State Warriors, and about diagnosing and dealing with the failure of a collaborative comics project. Just because your collaborator is a friend whose work you admire doesn't mean the two of you are going to be on the same page creatively. Irene and Jason on the show this Thursday. Until then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.